India is a country of 1 billion people, but only 700 universities, right? So I thought there was massive scope in creating something very beautiful in education, something that, propels India to the top of sort of these, rankings. Currently, as it stands, hardly any Indian institutions are in the top 100.
Yeah.
I mean, and we think that we have IITs and IIMs, and those are great, and they are. But on a global platform, they're also nowhere. And I thought that maybe I could solve that problem.
So a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Pratham Mittal, the founder of Masters Union. And we talked about his life and his entrepreneurial journey. And there was no plan. The interview was not scripted. There was no structure to it. It was just a free-flowing conversation. But the thing that I found really fascinating about his story, and you can watch the full conversation by clicking on the link in the description down below. That's the uncut version of this interview. The one that I'm going to be showing you guys today is just a chunk of the conversation that him and I had. But the thing that I found really fascinating about his story is that his entrepreneurial journey actually began long before he registered his first company. From experimenting with Yahoo stores as a kid to discovering hackathons in his college days, and then building this really fascinating tool called Nuisance, what's really interesting is how multiple times in his journey, he had to stop short. He wasn't able to fully pursue entrepreneurship because of the demands and requirements of the education system that he was in. School ended up occupying so much of his time and energy that he couldn't become the entrepreneur that he is today until he'd finished up with university. And so with his current company, Masters Union, Pratham is actually creating a place, a program that allows students to experiment with and pursue entrepreneurial thinking to a much larger extent than he was able to during his college days. This company encourages students to think outside of the box and tackle real-world problems in creative ways. In fact, after we'd finished recording the interview, Pratham told me that a quarter of the students that went through their first batch actually went on to found their own companies. For me personally, I learned a lot from the conversation. He's a seasoned entrepreneur at this point, so he has tons of gyan to share about his personal philosophy when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, and starting up. And I hope that you're able to take away as much from these 2 hours as I did during the time that I personally spent with Pratham Mittal. What would you say was the first experience that you had that was somewhat entrepreneurial?
Yeah. So I think we'd just got an internet at home for the first time. This is probably, I was like 10, 15 years old. And at the time on the internet, there were all these ads like make money, like make 100 rupees in one night. Those like clickbait ads. They like try to tell you or trick you into like clicking something because they'll tell you like, oh, you'll make money this way, you'll make money that way, right? And I was just intrigued. And I was like, wait, this just sounds too good to be true, right? Let me give it a shot. So I clicked on one of those ads, which was basically trying to get me to promote an URL for a product. I think it was those like phone cases, like back in the day, you had those large phones or pagers. I feel like it was some case for that. And like, hey, if you tell 10 of your friends to click on this link and if they purchase using that link, then you make all this money. And I was like, hey, this is easy money. Then I started going deeper. What is drop shipping? What is e-commerce? What Amazon doing? What is like this Flipkart thing, right? So I just went deeper and deeper and started understanding a little bit more about the internet economy. So I think that's my initial sort of curiosity bug, right? And from there on, once you're curious enough and once you go deep into anything, that just becomes your passion then. Then I was like, wait, all these people are making like such interesting businesses without any investment through dropshipping and through e-commerce. I gotta try this. I gotta figure it out, right? And so I remember setting up at the time some Yahoo store. Shopify came much later, but Yahoo stores I think came in like much earlier. I set up a Yahoo store. I didn't even end up selling anything, but just the fact that I like set up an account on that website, try to sort of like put on some products as listings, etc. I mean, I think that was just a lot of fun just to do, right? And then, then the Indian education system happened to me.
So this was before boarding school?
This is before boarding school or during boarding school.
Okay.
Right, when I would come back home for holidays. But in the boarding school, I would get so busy with math and science and history that all these things would sort of go for a toss completely.
So your curiosity takes a back seat to the traditional education.
You have to score well, right? I mean, you have
to, of course, because then you have to go to the best university and then you have to, yeah.
So you don't have time to yourself. And to explore your own passions, I think, as a product of Indian education system. Still, I think I was lucky because I was in a boarding school that focused a lot on sports.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I ended up playing a lot of sports. I ended up, swimming quite a bit, all of that stuff. So I think I learned a lot of things about life from sport. About again hustle, because one time what happened was that I was swimming, and I said, okay, I'm going to be a backstroker, right? I was naturally good at it, so I became a backstroker. And at that time, again, very early days of YouTube, very early days of YouTube, and I was like, wait, we have a coach here, and he's teaching everyone the same backstroke that he knows. I have a feeling that perhaps there's someone better on YouTube who can teach me swimming better, right? And so I went on YouTube.
That's like blasphemy.
Yeah. And I went on YouTube, and there was this video of this guy teaching backstroke on YouTube, right? And I realized that our coach had been teaching us something fundamentally wrong.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's a certain thing you have to do when your hand goes back, and he wasn't teaching us that. And that would easily shave off 20% of your time. Wow. Right? And I was like, wait, he's not teaching us this. Now I know something that nobody else does. And the next day, or whatever, the next week, there was a competition. I participated and I won that. I kicked ass in that competition, right? And I was like, wait, I just like, there was this information asymmetry. I knew a little bit more than anybody else.
Sure. This is like, people call this the unfair advantage, right?
Yeah.
You had the internet. Everyone else had the internet too,
Yeah.
but you knew how to leverage it to actually get ahead of the, in this case, competition. But anyway, so you went through that. You went through Doon School. Then you went to the University of Pennsylvania. I hope I'm not skipping over any entrepreneurial experiences along the way, because I think the next one that comes to mind from my research anyways is this hackathon. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like that's the next experience. Absolutely. It could be that there was something else. Was there anything else in between?
No. So I think entrepreneurship is also like a mindset, right? So you're entrepreneurial. I was entrepreneurial. I think I was entrepreneurial in my swimming. I was entrepreneurial when I was applying to colleges, right? So for example, all my friends thought that Penn was beyond our reach. So nobody even applied. Right? People were like, no, we can't apply to these top 10 because the SAT score requirement is this much and that, and let's give it a shot. I mean, like, let's set a target and let's give it a shot. And so I applied to top 20, all 20 colleges. Like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Penn, all of the colleges I just applied to. I was like, what's the worst? Right? I'll get rejected, but at least I'll know that I tried. And I got rejected from all of them except for Penn. I was like, all right, 1 out of 20 times, luck will save you. Yeah. I don't think I deserved it at all, but I got it. I think just because I applied enough places, I was bound to trick somebody into accepting me.
That's amazing.
I think so. That's also entrepreneurial.
Yeah, and I think again it comes back to that same idea of the going on YouTube and looking for something that nobody else was even thinking to look for, which was how to do the backstroke properly. Everybody just assumed that the teacher was teaching it properly, right? Your father setting up the lovely autos, everybody just assumed that was the way to do things. You go to another city to buy your scooter, yeah. Right? And everybody assumed that you can't set up a private college, private university. It's just not possible. It can't be done, right? So the entrepreneur in you, in your family, in your bloodline, has this propensity to question the norm and sort of try to see if there's any gaps that nobody else is noticing, because they have this herd mentality and they don't even look around to see if there's opportunities lying in wait.
Yeah. Bloodline is a stronger word, but yeah.
I think maybe in the Indian context that gets a little weird.
No, but I think it's just, I think 10% of, or maybe 20% of all people have this, right? It's also that I was very privileged to have opportunities to set up a Yahoo store. I mean, I had the internet, I had a computer at home. Most people wouldn't have that, right? So I think it was the perfect storm.
Okay, so you went to the University of Pennsylvania, which is also very cool. I love talking to entrepreneurs that have been outside of India, that have traveled. I'm assuming you had some American friends while you were there, people from other countries as well, because it's University of Pennsylvania. Yeah. Everybody wants to go. So tell me about this hackathon that I think you and your friend, was it Casey, set up?
Yeah.
Okay. So weren't you, I think I remember hearing that you had sort of taken that idea from Princeton, and did you?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the story.
Okay, sure. So
it's actually quite interesting. There was this email newsletter, and it said that, hey, there's a startup weekend happening at Princeton, right? Now, this sounds cool, right? I mean, it's at Princeton, it'll be a nice holiday. I'll love to see the campus as well. It was 2 hours away from where Penn was. And so I asked one of my friends, I was like, dude, there's a startup weekend. essentially it's 48 hours of a hackathon. We'll go set up an idea, build a team, build that product. And then we'll see what happens. If we win, we win. But we'll just go, worst comes to worst, we would have seen Princeton, right? And it's a beautiful campus, right? It's this old Victorian campus. So my friend is like, okay, let's do it, right? So we took a bus to Princeton. We reached there, and that was it, right? We just wanted to see Princeton. And
how far away is Princeton from?
Like a couple of hours.
Okay. You took a Greyhound or
yeah,
something?
we took a Greyhound.
Okay.
Yeah. Mega bus.
Oh, okay.
So we reached Princeton, and there we understood the format of the competition. The format was that, hey, listen, you have to first pitch your idea to the entire audience, and then you have to build your team. And then for 48 hours, you have to hack your product. And then at the end of the 48 hours, you have to present and pitch to the investors or the judges. And we said, fun, okay, let's do this. So we had an idea. We won't go into too many details. It was a fun idea, So actually, let's go into some details. It was basically a news product which would give you personalized news. So for example, let's say something happens in Japan, right? Like there's a nuclear attack that happens on Japan, right? I don't know. Or there's a nuclear leak. Let's be less political.
Gosh, this has happened.
So let's say there's an earthquake in Japan, right? It's not relevant to you in any way. But what this product would do is would tell you exactly which of your friends, associates, and acquaintances will be most affected by that, depending on who was in Japan, who had maybe done a Foursquare check-in or maybe had put up a Facebook update from Japan, whatever, right? So it'll make news very contextual. So we built this product out, built a team of 7-8 people. We had no intention of winning because there were people who were much older than us. There were MBA students and there were PhD students and there were all these.
Princeton.
It's Princeton, yeah. At the end of the day, and so we had we didn't even try to win, right? We just tried to have fun. So we built a team of 5-6 folks. We worked overnight, and then we hacked out this product, and then we went and presented, and it just so happened that at the end of the presentation, when they were announcing the results, they start with like rank 3, like rank 2, and then they go to rank 1, right? Like, third prize, second prize, first prize. And then the people who got the third prize were people who I did not expect to even win, right? Or like even come top 10. I was like, oh, interesting. Like, maybe we actually have a chance. And then second was someone that was predictable. And then the third, they said nuisance. And we're like, wait, what? Like we didn't believe it for some time. And so we all went to sort of accept that prize. And then there was like this confusion on my face. And the judge who was giving us the prize, like, why are you so confused? Why do you look so confused? You actually won. So I think that victory really gave me a lot of confidence that, hey, listen, like, we're not less than anybody else, or like these Princeton folks or these PhD folks. Our idea actually had some worth or some merit to it. And our execution wasn't all that bad. And our presentation at the end of the day sort of brought it all together. So that confidence that it gave me was transformational, I think. Because I think that's what validated the entrepreneur in me. Okay, you can do this, right? And thereafter, I sat out of the on-campus recruitment cycle. So at Penn, we have these like Google and Facebook and Bain and BCG and McKinsey all coming and recruiting. But I decided not to sit because I was so sure of then continuing working on my startup harder.
Wow. So you took NewSense as a startup to actually build out as a founder?
Yeah. I was like, might as well. I mean, like these 3 judges feel that it's a good idea. I have a team already. Let's just build it out.
Wow.
Right? So we started building it out.
A team, like a group of friends that you...
So
or was the people who attended the hackathon?
Hackathon, yeah. So you build a team amongst the people who were at the hackathon.
Got it. Just new people that you've never met?
Never met before.
Wow.
Never met before. So most of them, I mean, they left the team, obviously, because, I mean, it was a weekend thing for them, right? But a couple of them, stuck by. But then even like over a couple of years, as we worked on that idea, we realized that this idea is actually not going anywhere because it's very hard to monetize, it's very hard to scale, there are these issues, that issues, dependency on Foursquare, dependency on Facebook, dependency on Twitter. They change their algorithms every day. We said, okay, forget about it. But that insight into all of those things was amazing.
Sure.
Right? I learned so much about that entire ecosystem, APIs, how to work with APIs because we had to call all those APIs. I forced myself to learn Photoshop. I forced myself to learn Marvel at that time. All these apps to sort of, build the initial prototypes, etc. So all in all, a great experience. It ended up completely as a failed startup, but a great experience nonetheless.
Wow.
And so thereafter, I realized the power of hackathons. And then I started another hackathon at my own school at Penn called Hack the Change with Casey, which is, I think, probably
Sure.
what you
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
I want to understand, it's a really important experience for you, a failed startup, right? And I think people skim over that. They don't like to talk about their failures. They just want to move on. You want to talk about Masters Union. You want to talk about more recent things. But so many people who are watching this video right now are either dreaming of starting up, meaning they're like on the cusp, or they're currently like actually ideating. They're in that sort of ideation seed stage, whatever stage you want to call it, right? Where they're kind of like trying to find a co-founder, or they're trying to maybe talk to investors, like pitching some sort of prototype or MVP. That must have been a really difficult thing for you to let go of, right? Nuisance, or not really? Were you kind of like, oh, it's not working out, that's fine, I'll just start something else?
I think I had been working on it for like over a year. So there's
That's
a certain
huge
commitment.
investment.
Yeah, there's a certain commitment you have, right? However, as soon as I realized the inherent flaws in the business, it became very easy to let go of it, right? I was like, I'm not married to this. I'm 21, or 19 at the time, or whatever, 20. I was like, I can definitely take the best of my learnings and create something new, right? So that's what happened. I mean, I didn't get married to it. It was very easy to let go. It wasn't that hard. I mean, in hindsight, I'm thinking whether like I really loved that idea enough or not. I mean, but I think I was flexible enough to let go of it. I think it's easier, no?
Wow.
Don't you?
I don't know. Sometimes I think about startups and businesses as the same way I look at like relationships. And I feel like a lot of the time, the first startup that somebody creates is almost like their first love, their first girlfriend or whatever. It's very hard to let go of. It's like this very like, you think you're going to get married and have kids and live happily ever after.
I see that.
But maybe coming from a business background, your family, you'd seen your dad build multiple things, your grandfather as well. Maybe you were kind of like, you just didn't have that sort of puppy dog love for your first startup. You were like, no, I can start another thing later on. It's fine.
I think I had puppy dog love for starting up, period.
Okay.
Right?
You weren't ready to let go of that.
I wasn't ready to let go of starting up. I had some very good companies offering me jobs, right? I mean, all of that was there. But I did not let go of starting up. I let go of that idea. And I knew that idea was going nowhere.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. Yeah. Did you have something that you were like ready to jump into next, or it was kind of like, I'll just wait and see?
No, again, I mean, like, college is hard, right? I mean, maybe, exams or trials started, and then like, the focus completely shifted, and then you also want to score, you have all these expectations from home that you'll do well in college. So I think it was like a zigzag sort of a time, right? Like entrepreneurial, not so entrepreneurial. Okay, you have some time, become entrepreneurial, and then you have exams, and then you let go of it.
Sure.
So you sort of, zigzag a little bit. But then another thing happened, which was that I was part of this class. And in that class, we used to have local companies come in and give us problem statements that we would have to solve for, right? The class was called Engineering Entrepreneurship or something, right? So solving problems through engineering, essentially. And so one of the local companies that came was this company called Philadelphia Inquirer, which is a local newspaper in Philadelphia, one of the oldest ones. And they said, hey, listen, we have this website, we run it on WordPress. I don't know exactly. So they used to run it on WordPress, and then they wanted to run some polls on the website because elections were coming up. And they're like, we want to do these like Obama versus, at that time, Romney, I think, right? These polls. And right now we have to code these polls ourselves, right? And can someone in the class help us create a system where we don't have to code these polls every time? And so Randy is one of my friends from that same class, now my business partner. We decided to build out that small widget or that small product for Philadelphia Inquirer as a project. And we sent it to them over email and we said, hey, listen, this is done. And they replied back saying that, hey, listen, here's like a few $1,000s. Can you like make it a little bit more secure? Right? Like, because there was no security feature that we had built into it. And we said, okay, thanks for the cash, by the way. But so, we made a few changes and we sent it back to them. And then they sent us another like check of like a few $1,000s and said, can you make these other improvements? And what we realized was that we were actually building a full end-to-end product for them, which, by the way, we could have gone and sold to anybody else as well. So then we went next to New York Times. And we just like knocked on John Pogue's like office, and then we said, hey, listen.
Oh, you literally showed up at the office and just...
Yeah, it was in New York. We were interning there with some company. So we just like went to, I think it was 48th and 11th, like the 48th Street, 11th Avenue. Went up to them and said, hey, can we get a meeting with John Pogue? They said, sure, he's upstairs, 11th floor, go. We went to the 11th floor, said, hey, listen, we built this thing. Would you be interested in trying it out? He's like, I was looking for something exactly like this.
Wow.
And we got a $100,000 check from, it took some 2-3 months after that, but essentially we closed New York Times as a client. And they're like, hey, listen, we have hit a gold mine. Now, let's just finish college and like, let's go full deep into it. Both of us were not ready to drop out. Right. So we said, we'll do this on the side.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when we sort of, stumbled upon this SaaS style pricing, that $30 a month, $60 a month. So we created these 3 packages, like a startup package and a mid-tier enterprise package and a full large enterprise package. So it started off $30 per month. It went up to like $100,000 a month, depending on what services you were using.
Seriously, 100,000?
Yeah. Our largest customer pays us like 100,000 a month.
They were willing to pay that much?
Their business depends on it.
Wow, that's incredible. So what, was it profitable then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is that when is a company not profitable? A company is not profitable when it spends a lot on marketing, right? That's usually the major expense that causes you to burn cash, right? And that's the case with all the Indian startups over the last couple of years, right? If your acquisition channel is word of mouth, if your acquisition channel is genuinely the uniqueness of your product and not just you giving discounts, right? In an otherwise crowded market, you will be profitable, right? Because even if you look at, for example, Zomato, right? On a unit economics level, they are actually profitable, but it's just that as a company, they're not profitable. Similar, I think it's true for various other companies, Unacademy, etc. So, essentially, if you get that CAC game right, which if you have a good product and good first initial early adopters who are ready to sort of give the reference for you, I don't think you will be unprofitable.
Right.
Like I fail to see sometimes that what are these guys spending money on? Why are they not profitable? What is like this $600 million burn? Like why? Where is that money going? That's one. Number 2, the other thing is that when you're acquiring customers, right? Google and Facebook is the easiest way to acquire customers, right? You can just throw more money at Google, you'll get more customers. More money at Facebook, more customers. Not in a sustainable way though. But when you have money, it spoils you, right? It doesn't force you to think about other cheaper acquisition channels. It's like, this is working, why would I sort of change, right? So I think funding and easy funding makes founders lazy. And they stop experimenting with unique acquisition channels. They just rely or over-rely on Google and Facebook, and that's when they become unsustainable.
And I think it gives them a false sense of maybe security isn't the right word.
Success.
But success, right? Like, oh, we've got so many customers coming in. They don't know if that's a result of their heavy spend in marketing or if that's actually people who are genuinely excited about their product until the investors stop pouring money into the startup. And then suddenly they're like, oh, okay, it was a lot to do with the marketing, not so much about the product. Now we need to quickly scramble and fix the product up. But seems like you were basically listening to your customers as things went. As you started to improve, you're getting more and more revenue from these customers because the value that you're adding is increasing day by day.
So we built the company over 10 years. Had we had funding and we were serious about it and we were not lazy with it, maybe we would have been able to do that in 4-5 years. I would give you that I think fundraising can sort of accelerate the growth, right? But it's up to the founder to be responsible as to how that growth comes. But definitely, I think nothing wrong with fundraising, but I think you have to be responsible.
Yeah, you have to use it in the right way. So, by the way, that company is still in existence, still around?
Absolutely. So Randy and I ran that company for 10 years together. Now Randy runs it full time. It's still based in the US.
Are you guys still? You guys are the only owners?
Yeah, the only owners. And it's been a great experience. In Hindi we call it dhanda. I don't know if you've come across that term yet.
I haven't.
Dhanda is pure raw business.
Wow.
Right, without these embellishments of fundraising and burn and all of that. Dhanda means like profit and loss, right?
I feel like the Mittal family is a dhanda family.
India is a dhanda country. Like Ambani, Adani, etc. All these companies, they are all scaled up companies.
Those are, yeah, the traditional, big companies. But when we talk about startups, that's a different thing, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'll challenge you a little bit there. Right? I think there are plenty of tech companies that did not fundraise and have scaled up. I mean, Freshworks, Soho, Naukri. I mean, these are not companies that raised funds early on in their lives.
Yeah.
And they became profitable, and then they raised maybe a little bit of money or went public to raise more funds. But I think you'll find more successful examples of bootstrap companies in India than successful examples of non-bootstrap companies in India. Zerodha, I mean, you talk about Zerodha so much on your channel.
Yeah. 10 years building, outgrow. And then what was the point where you would have learned so much along the way, right? About leadership, about building a startup, not about fundraising.
Yeah, a lot of time saved, yeah.
Because so many founders spend all of their time out there
Like
fundraising.
the two co-founders, one is like the stakeholder management founder, and one is the ops founder.
Yeah, one of them is just on a plane constantly. So you saved yourself a bunch of time. What was the point where you kind of started to realize that maybe it's time for me to start something else?
So Outgrow is a niche, right? We don't have too many customers, right? We have limited set of customers, and we don't intend to have more, right? Because we have to service them well. So at a point, two things happened in around just before COVID. Two things happened. One was that Outgrow as a product was reaching maturity, right? There was only so much that I, as a product person, could bring to it, right? And Randy, who runs the business side of things, the sales and the marketing side of things, his job was now more important. So essentially, we discussed that he will take over the company, and at the same time, I wanted to move back to India.
Okay.
Because I had been out of India for a while, and I never intended to leave India. And I felt that with all the knowledge that I had gained in the US, working on Outgrow from Penn, I thought the dividend that I'll be able to extract out of that in India would be a lot more than it would be in New York, right? Also, I wanted to work in education in India because my parents had been working in education in India, and I saw how fulfilling it was for them to be in education, right? So I thought that education is something that has a couple of things going for it. First, it has great gross margins, right? So you don't have to rely on fundraising. So that's the kind of business that I want to run where I don't have to rely on fundraising. Second, that it has a lot of impact, right? People are straight away touched. And thirdly, you don't have to haggle with the customer. There are only a few things in life that people save for, right? Buying a home, right? Education, maybe a car, but that's about it, right? So when people have already made up their mind that they have to spend on education, it's easier to sort of to close that deal, right? So when you went to college, I know you dropped out, or when you went to college, did you negotiate your fees? No.
Never,
right?
Nobody does. Yeah.
Nobody does, right? So I thought that with all those things going for it, education would be like the right space for me to enter. But most importantly, it was also that India needed good institutions, right? India is a country of 1 billion people, but only 700 universities, right? So I thought there was massive scope in creating something very beautiful in education, something that, propels India to the top of sort of these, rankings. Currently, as it stands, hardly any Indian institutions are in the top 100 of either business schools or engineering schools.
I've noticed that, yeah. I've always wondered that too, because you hear all about the Ivy Leagues and
Oxford, Cambridge,
yeah,
universities in Germany, etc., but none in India.
Yeah.
I mean, and we think that we have IITs and IIMs, and those are great, and they are. But on a global platform, they're also nowhere. And I thought that maybe I could solve that problem.
Why did you decide? I know you said that you wanted to get back to India, and you had also identified this problem. Was there any hesitation there? Like, should I start a company in the United States or go back to India? Like, I feel like a lot of people idolize this life of moving to the United States as a startup founder, in New York, right? Yeah. The Big Apple. A lot of people would decide or opt to stay in the United States once and you've spent 10 years, right? You've built up probably a group of friends, you have your favorite
network,
cafe and restaurant, like your life is there, right? What was the thought process there coming back to India, or was it like a non-decision? You're like, this is just what has to...
No, I think it's a very utilitarian decision, right? I I remember making an Excel and comparing the two opportunities. The thing is that in India, other than the fact that I had my parents here, the opportunities in India are boundless, right? In the US, first of all, the market is of 300 million. In India, it's 1 point something billion, right? So first of all, the market is much larger. Number two, the market is very underpenetrated, right? For every, one company in India, there are 10 in the US, right? So when you enter a market in the US, you're already competing with a bunch of folks. In India, when you enter into a market, more often than not, you're competing with fewer folks. And by virtue of my experience in the US, I thought I would have a natural advantage over them, which, by the way, turned out to be wrong in some cases because they knew the market in India a lot better than I did. But still, I thought that I had some maybe technical dividend, or maybe I had some insights that might be helpful in India. So in that sense, I realized that to build a business in India would be a lot simpler than the US. Also in the US, human resource is very expensive, right? In India, as compared to your revenue or your overall costs, the human resource cost is actually slightly lesser. So all those factors, I realized that if I have to start a company, I might as well do it in India. And also education is a much bigger problem in India than it is in the US.
Very true.
It's still a problem in the US, by the way.
Of course.
A big one. But in India, it's a lot more grave. So I thought India would be the right place.
All right. So you made up your mind, packed your bags, bought your tickets. Or did you already start planning the company while you were in the US? Or was it like, feet on the soil, I'm here in India, now let's start?
I forget, actually. I think it was a little bit of both, right? I knew that I had to do something in education, but then I came back and then I spent 2 months having conversations with stakeholders, talking to students, talking to my dad.
Market research.
And then after doing all of that, I realized that, hey, listen, okay, I've made a lot of mistakes in life. I don't want to repeat any of those, right? So one of the mistakes that I'd made was, spending too much time thinking and building the product before going to market, right? So here I thought, I'm going to go to market first, right? And then build the product around sort of the problems that I see. So lots of those learnings I utilized in this chapter 2. And then, so I think it was like a mix of it. So I knew which industry I wanted to get into, but to figure out exactly what I wanted to do, maybe a couple of months of market research.
I think we kind of skimmed over that with Outgrow, but I think what you're hinting at with the problems or the mistakes you made in the past was that you had kind of gotten this early validation from those customers, and so you built out the product really quickly, but then it was really messy and sloppy, and you realized that a lot of this stuff is not even adding value, and nobody even wants to use these features. And so was that kind of what happened with Outgrow?
Yeah, I mean, so Outgrow was an unplanned product, and that's what it looked like at the end of 5 years. So for the next leg of our journey, we had to really sort of uncook that entire meal and cook it again,
right,
in a way that made sense.
So with Masters Union.
So with Masters Union, I want to make sure that I don't make that same mistake, and that I know enough about the market beforehand that I plan my product and I plan my approach in a strategic way, right? Not just sort of throw darts at the wall.
So what did that consist of in the real world? You first do a little bit of market research, you're talking to people, then what, you start building or I mean?
So I planned it so Masters Union is a planned project, right? I knew on day 0 exactly how much money we would have in the bank in year 3, in year 4, in year 5, right? So Masters Union was a very well thought out business plan and playbook and execution plan. And we have stuck to it, right? So I sat down, spent a couple of months just sort of making sure that, okay, in first year, we're going to target these many students. In year 2, we're going to target these many students. In tier 3, because of the kind of results we would have given in year 1, we can target these many students. This is how much we would spend in marketing. I knew exactly how much, and the keyword MBA costs, right, on Google. So I budgeted for that. I knew exactly what kind of conversion rates I would have, right? Because of all the 10 years of work that we had put in, we knew exactly, what these economics and these funnels look like. So we planned for all of that. And so when we sort of built the car essentially on paper, and then when we sort of wanted to manufacture it, build the campus, we just had to execute the playbook that we had already planned out.
Got it.
Right. So, on day 1, we, launched our website. And by the way, we didn't even have a campus, right? We started building the campus once the first class had already been admitted.
Oh.
Right.
What did that? Sorry, what's it called? Cohort? Did their opinions inform your decisions about building the campus?
Absolutely, right. So, for example, first year I said that, I'm going to target 60 students, right? and this would be their age category, this will be their experience, this will be all of that. But would I be able to get those kind of students? I had enough confidence that I would be able to, but it wasn't for certain, right? Now imagine if I build this beautiful campus, right? I spend money doing that. And then students actually don't end up joining for whatever reason. And by the way, it was peak COVID, right? So there was another risk there.
Right.
That what if
schools were shutting down.
Schools were shutting down, right? And we actually built a master's union in the middle of pandemic, like wave 1, by the way. And so there was a lot of uncertainty. So we said, all right, let's first admit the students. Let's go through the admissions process. And once we know that they're coming in, then we'll start building the campus. And in fact, you require like CapEx, right? You need to spend money building these walls and carpets and, tables and chairs. And so it was only when the students paid their fees.
I was going to ask about that.
Right.
I was like, how did you do this financially? Like, so you actually, that's like taking a note out of these like EV startups, right? They take pre-orders. They use the pre-order money to build the product.
That's what we did. I mean, it's Kickstarter, right? Essentially.
Yeah.
So we collected the fees from our first cohort, whatever like little amount it was, and then we used that to build the campus.
Wow.
So we had a negative working capital problem, right? We didn't have to raise capital then. So education for the last 5, 10, 15,000 years has not changed. It's still the same where a teacher comes in front of a bunch of students, speaks something, the students take notes or make mental notes, and then there's an exam at the end of which it is tested whether the students understood what the teacher said. That has not changed. Maybe it has come online, some of those aspects, but still it's somebody talking to somebody and somebody sort of taking an exam, right? It's still the same. Education has not changed. And we know that to an extent this works, but it doesn't work very, very well, right? And if I were to ask you a question, right? Or if I were to ask anybody a question here, what is the one thing that you remember from your classroom or from your college time, right? More often than not, people will have an answer which has nothing to do with the courses they took. It would be, the experiences they had in the hostel. It would be the experiences they had running a club. It would be the experiences they had starting a company. But it would never be that, hey, you know what? I learned this concept in a classroom and that was the most rewarding experience of my college life.
We forget all that stuff.
We forget all of that. That means whatever we are learning from college or what we value at a college is everything except for the classroom. But we spend for the classroom, right? We pay money to sit in a classroom. So I think what we understood or what the hypothesis was that, hey, listen, we need to look at the education system from a different lens, right? And we have to throw out all the norms and all the sort of understandings of how things work today, right? We have to sort of look at it from ground up and recreate it, right? And so we thought we'll do 3 things, essentially, 3 experiments. The first experiment was that we'll try to bring in practitioners rather than career academics to come and teach in the classroom. The reason for this was that in the US and India, across the world, you have people who are teaching in a classroom, many of who have never actually worked in the industry. So you're learning computer science from somebody who might have never worked in the software industry, right? And maybe what they're teaching you is useful to you, sure. But I think there is somebody else who maybe can teach those concepts better. And we always say that, our graduates are not employable and all of that. This is the reason. Right? If the people who are teaching them are not the people who have worked in the industry, how do you expect the students to be ready for the industry? Now, if you think of a medical college, right? A medical college always has teachers who are actual doctors, who are doing surgeries, right? So why is that not the case in computer science education or in business education or in any other field, right? So that was the first experiment we wanted to run, which is can we bring in practitioners to come and teach? And of course, we'll have academics as well who will bring rigor to the classroom, who will make sure that the students are serious about the assignments and all of that. So you need sort of a mixture of the two. So that was experiment 1. Second experiment was that we said, you know what, we will not do classes traditionally. We will not have accounting 101 and management 101 and computer science 101. We will not have exams at the end of every class where there's 100 marks and then 20 marks of practical and 80 marks of theory and all of that. We just throw all of that out. What we do here in Masters Union is essentially we've divided the year into 8 terms, and in each term, students run a business, right? In term 1, as it stands today, they're running an e-commerce dropshipping business. So all the students in teams of 5 will be running a business and competing with each other on revenue, not grades.
So wait, are they literally generating revenue?
They're literally generating revenue.
Oh, wow.
Right? So someone's running a store where they sell, bed sheets, right? That are Star Wars themed, right? Someone's selling, phone covers, and someone's selling cutlery. So people are actually doing. Remember what I use the word dhanda, right? So a business school teaches you nothing if not how to make money, right? So first term itself, they're building a business. They will make mistakes. They will get things wrong. But because there's no investment required,
right.
There's nothing to lose, only some things to learn.
This was my experience in school where I wanted to get out there into the real world and start making mistakes and making money, right? Consequence and reward. But the thing is that it's very scary when you get out there because you don't have any safety net. You don't have a master's union or like a safety net to kind of protect you from the real world. So here there's a bit of a buffer, right? It's like we're building something, but there's also not really a huge investment. There's also not really huge consequences. Because if I make a mistake, it's actually a benefit because I learn from that mistake so that when I do get in the real world, I can actually, perform better.
Absolutely. I mean, see, in college, it's risk-free, right? You've already paid the fees. You're already here. You're here to learn now. And universities and colleges were safe spaces for experimentation. That's why they existed in the first place. We made them about exams and about classes, but that's not how it's supposed to be. So in term 1, they build this dropshipping business. In term 2, they're all going to be building a blockchain business. In term 3, they're going to all be building a YouTube page and try to make money off of that YouTube page. In term 5, they're going to build a cloud kitchen. In term 6, term 7. So similarly, they're going to create these 8 businesses and they're going to learn business by creating these 8 businesses and making mistakes and doing all of those things, right? We have professors and practitioners and academics who come in, but they come in and teach workshops that directly help these businesses that they run, right? So today that they are doing this dropshipping business, we have someone who's coming in and teaching them, direct-to-consumer branding, how that works. We have somebody coming in teaching supply chain. We have somebody coming in teaching accounting so that you can keep accounts, right? So those things help the business directly. And
there are practical skills that they need to learn as well, right?
Absolutely. What happens in schools is that you learn something and you only get to apply it 4 years later when you graduate. By that time, you have forgotten, right? So here you get to apply all the stuff that you learn in courses right in the evening as you build those businesses. So that's how we're trying to create a differentiated higher education institution, right? And the third experiment we wanted to run was that we wanted to mix business and technology, right? So most universities are like, hey, listen, here's an engineering degree and here's a business degree, right? And you choose one of the two. But that's not how the world functions, right? I mean, you run your own YouTube channel. It requires tech and it requires business understanding, right? Similar is the case with most of the businesses out there. So students today in Masters Union study both business and tech, right? So that's why we don't call ourselves an MBA. We call it TBM, Technology and Business Management. So those 3 experiments are around which we created Masters Union and built our first cohort.
I don't know how exactly to frame this, but I'm listening to you describe Masters Union, what you're offering to your students, and I can't help but look back on the story that you've already told me about your life. Doon School, you're building a Yahoo store. You go to University of Pennsylvania, you're building Nuisance. And you never got a chance to really build those out fully. You never got a chance. You also didn't have mentors who are like coaching you, or teachers in this case, or professors who are actually like walking with you through that journey. Or maybe you did. I'm not sure if you ever shared this with your instructors. You might have talked about it, but you didn't have something like Masters Union where they're actually
like a structured way, no.
A structured way, exactly. You never had that opportunity. And so I don't know if you've ever looked at it from this perspective, but it really feels like you are trying to give students what you did not have while you were going through school in the traditional education, right? Now you're offering an alternative education, essentially, right? It is like a business school, but it's structured in a different way, right? You guys you're doing something innovative, disruptive. I don't know. Have you ever
That's a great point, actually. I never thought of it like that.
It's almost, it's like subconscious, right? Like you're just kind of, you had that desire when you were growing up, and now you're you're not able to go back in time,
Yeah.
but you're able to offer it to other students.
I generally never thought of it like that, but I think to me that's how learning happens. You can only learn by doing. You cannot learn by sitting in a classroom. I just don't think learning happens that way. Uh, you know, there's a class called accounting, fundamentals of accounting or something, right? That was the most boring class I did when I was in college, right? I used to wake up in the morning and like, oh, accounting class. I mean, I don't know when I'll use this. I don't think I'm going to become an accountant. I know it's important because, you have to run a business, but it was just very irritating to be in that class. At Masters Union, one of our very popular courses is accounting. And the reason for that is that the professor, the way he teaches accounting, is that he tells you that the business that you're running in the evening, I'm going to check the books for that business every day, right? And I'm going to see exactly how clean those books are. I'm going to see, exactly like how close to standards the balance sheet is, what is the quality of, the appropriations, all of those things, right? And he's basically built it into a game, right? And so even though accounting in an alternate universe or in an original, in other universities is considered to be a boring course, here because they get to apply it and learn from it in real life and see, how it impacts the business, maintaining those books, I think it improves the student engagement in the class like 100-fold.
Definitely. It feels real, but it's not real, right? He's not actually the income tax department, but he's pretending to be.
Exactly.
Whereas in a traditional education, there's not even that professor who's watching over your shoulder and trying to coach you along the way, right? It's just like textbook, exams, assignments that are just...
You put it so well. I mean, he's not the income tax department, but he is. That's perfect.
It's great, right? I love it. I love this idea.
He's going to audit the books, just the way income. Perfect, yeah.
And the thing too, like, that I just can't believe, that I can't wrap my head around is that if I hadn't met you, if I hadn't researched Masters Union, I would have just assumed that this is like a very idealistic company, and your customers, your students who are coming here, they don't really, they're not going to actually get anything out of this, right? They have a great experience. They had their 16 months, right?
Yeah.
And then they left and they actually went and did a real education so that they could get their degree and get a job. But the crazy thing is that when you graduate from Masters Union, you actually get a job and you get a salary or an offer that's higher than most IIMs, most, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing that blows my mind, because that's like proof that this actually works, right? I remember the story of Dipinder Goyal. He finished his college. He actually couldn't get a job. That's the way he said it. I'm not sure if that's the reality, but the way he said it was kind of like, or at least he couldn't get a job that he wanted. Anyone can get a job. You can go get a job at McDonald's, right? But he didn't want like some low-level job. He wanted a good job. And he couldn't find anything. I guess maybe his grades were a little bit low or something. I could be wrong about that. But then he went and started the sort of early version of Zomato, which was Foodlet, called Foodlet at the time. That failed, but he spent time building it up, right? He had a small team of people. And then when he went to go and apply for Bain & Company, that was what he showed them during the interview. He said, I've just spent time, I've been building this company, Foodlet. It didn't work out, but these are the things that I learned along the way. And they hired him because of that. Like, that's what he said. He's like, I probably would not have gotten the job at Bain if I hadn't started Foodlet. So it sounds like it's sort of a similar thing, right?
It's exactly that. I mean, I recruit people, right? I'm an employer here. And if somebody comes and tells me, hey, listen, I started a company, it didn't work out, but these are my learnings from it, I know three things. One is that the person is entrepreneurial, so he's going to be entrepreneurial in the job. He has or she has that DNA. Second is that they've learned from their mistakes, and that's the nature that they carry. And third is that they're hustlers, yeah. I mean, they've like done something which is hard, which maybe like 90% of people won't even think of doing. So you have to give them that. And that's straight away like a 10 on 10 on attitude. And, so even if the skill is slightly less, I would still prefer that person over someone who has a skill but does not have the entrepreneurial bug or DNA.
So basically anybody who's watching wants a job at Masters Union. Those are the three things that you need to have in order to get a job. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about, again, coming back to the current landscape in the edtech space. We're kind of realizing now in this funding winter, there's a lot of, and we were talking about this earlier too, there's a lot of companies that are not profitable, they're burning through tons of money, and as soon as the investors back off, then suddenly they just crumble and they go out of business, right? So Is Masters Union sort of aiming towards profitability? And if so, like what are some of the initiatives that you guys are actually using to get to that point?
No, it's, very interesting. Globally, education businesses are some of the highest gross margin businesses, right? So when all these edtech companies were not making money, I was thoroughly confused. I was like, it does not make sense. It's impossible to lose money in education, right? Universities, schools, colleges across the world, if you look at Harvard's like balance sheet, it looks so pretty. Like if Harvard was a business, I'm sure it would be as big as like Apple, right? If it was like a listed business,
Right, okay.
In terms of like the price to earnings ratio, in terms of EBITDA margins, in terms of all of those things, right? So when these edtech companies are not making money, it begs the question, why are they losing money, right? The reason a lot of edtech companies are losing money is because their core DNA is sales and not outcomes, right? When you have to sell a product, right, and when you have to push somebody to buy that product from you, your CAC will rise. But on the other side, if you're giving outcomes to your students, they will go and market your product for you. Let's compare. There's this company called Allen. I don't know if you've heard of Allen.
Yeah. Are they quota-based?
The quota-based, the tuition, the JEE tuition and NEET tuition company, right? They are probably some 2 lakh students maybe enrolled in Allen. I think their marketing budget is minuscule, right? Because they run one ad or maybe a couple of ads every year where they say, hey, you know what? JEE rank 1, my student. JEE rank 2, my student. JEE rank 3, my student. That's all they need to do. It's an announcement post, right? But on the other hand, some edtech companies feel the need to like, hey, our product is 40,000 rupees, but you get 20% discount, so it's 30,000 rupees, whatever, right? Let me give you another example, right? So when we have some online programs as well called master camps that we run, which are fully online. So when people apply to a master camp, they actually have to pay me an application fees.
Oh.
Right? With other edtechs, by mistake, if you leave your email somewhere in their jungle, they will call you 100 times. So you see the difference in the approach, right? Where if you are an institution that gives outcomes, people will actually pay you to apply to your college. But if you're not the kind of institution that is offering outcomes and just sort of selling a product, then sort of you'll have to sell, So that's really the difference in the approaches that we have to look at, right? We have to go back to our original education DNA, where if we offer outcomes, people will come.
What would it take to bring true edtech to the Indian market? Just like a brainstorming session.
Sure. Let's look at a few dimensions, I think. So first is, I think, how can we make education personalized? Right now, big challenge that I face is that for me, I have to treat each of my 60 students as a cohort, not as individuals, because I don't have the technology to understand and to track each student's progress, right? So if I'm teaching them algebra, just to dumb it down, if I'm teaching them algebra, there are 60 students, they lie on a spectrum on their understanding of algebra. But I'm giving them the same input, I'm giving them the same exam, right? So if there was a company that could help, using the latest tech tools out there to help personalize education for teachers. So give teachers tools so that they know exactly where each student lies, right? I think that could make a few great companies. Second, I think, is gaming, right? I truly believe that the way games hook people for like hours at a stretch, I think if we created our lessons in the form of games, we could make education also like something that people hook onto.
So true.
Right. The third, I think, is like, I was watching The Crown. If you've seen The Crown.
I've heard of it. I tried the first episode. Not for me.
Not for you? All right. I watched it. I binge watched it. And I learned more about British history from watching The Crown than like any of the courses I've taken in my in college, right? So education and entertainment, when it sort of comes together, what you're doing, right? I'm sure more people would say that they've learned more from your channel than one of their courses, right? There was this one company which some of our students were working on. I don't know what happened with it, which I thought was very cool. So they made a game, which is a stock market simulator for high school students.
Wow.
Right? So you go do deep research about Reliance or about Adani, and then you sort of make your portfolio and etc. And then like all the school students will make their individual portfolios and they will compete with other schools on whose average portfolio is doing better.
Wow.
Right? And this got like students who are in class 8, class 7 hooked onto the stock market.
It's like trading, but with monopoly money, presumably.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Fascinating. I think a lot of people watching this have already gotten like 100 ideas from this conversation.
I know. And I mean, like, I was reading this somewhere that there's this university in, I think, Canada, I think somewhere, where one of the most boring courses that they were taught, that they were teaching or whatever, that had the least amount of engagement from students was thermodynamics. Right? So what they did was, they made they scrapped that class. They called it Creating a Go-Kart. They named the course Creating a Go-Kart. And so they had in groups of 5 or 6, students had to build their own go-karts, right? And the professor's thought was that, hey, listen, if the students can create their go-karts, and if they can sort of test their go-karts against certain parameters and they pass, I can understand and I can deem to believe that they understand heat transfer and thermodynamics. I don't have to test them on the numericals, etc., because as part of creating that, they have internalized heat transfer. They have internalized thermodynamics, which no amount of numericals and problem statements and all of those things can do. So I think like there's a company, it's possible to create a company for every lesson that we teach in schools.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like, yeah, like you said, people, they focus on the topic itself, thermodynamics. They don't actually make it interesting. They don't gamify it, at least traditional education, right? So, well, I really hope that Masters Union goes beyond, I don't know if that's part of the plan, but goes beyond just engineering and business and actually tackle some of these other subjects, like, for example, thermodynamics, or I guess that would fall in the category of maybe physics or like science or whatever, right? I almost failed those courses.
I'm going to pause you here, right?
Sure.
No. Masters Union should focus on business, right? And we should solve this problem really well. That's the Edtech mindset, right? Now that I've made my mark here, let me make my mark here.
True.
And that's when you spread yourself too far, too wide, and too thin. That's what we need to stay clear of. If we have figured out a solution to a problem, we should try to bring that solution to as many people, not go chasing other problems.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Right? I mean, like,
or at least nail that down.
Nail that down fully.
Spend, like you said, like you spent 10 years, building your previous company, and then,
Let's build a great MBA school before we start getting into like engineering and business, engineering and medicine, etc.
Sure.
So that's what I think that, we have to sort of get outside of this startup mindset in some ways, right? Of
you realize who you're talking to.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like,
get out of the startup mindset, but
this startup mindset of trying to do everything, right? Just do one thing really well, right? Like, I mean, if you're a JEE tutor, just become the best JEE tutor. That's a big enough of a market. But the thing is that you're chasing certain metrics for your investors, so you have to get into NEET. You have to get into this other exam. You have to get into class 12. You have to get into SATs and GMAT. No, just do well there. Alan still just does JEE and NEET. They don't do those bank PO exams. They don't do GMAT. They don't do SAT. They're like, no, this is our market. We're just going to do this well. Wow. Sorry, this came out very passionately.
It should. I mean, I think we should probably quit while we're ahead. That was like the culmination of this entire conversation. I think it's so true. I mean, I was thinking as a photographer and as a former student, ex-student, probably never again student, right, that I wanted to have a master's union of photography. But what you're saying is so applicable, especially to the current situation, right, where investors are basically just chasing after higher valuations, and they're forcing is a strong word, but encouraging startup founders to, like you said, spread yourselves too thin. And don't worry, the funding will just keep coming. So you can keep expanding and you can keep sustaining those little territories that you've captured. But then suddenly, in a funding winter, now we have a situation where none of this is sustainable without the drip feed of venture capital. So,
absolutely.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up there.
All right, awesome.
And I'll let you go. But thank you so much for taking the time, sharing not just about Masters Union, but about your entire life. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. I definitely learned a lot.
Thank you so much. No, thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah. All right.
We're about to ask you this. How many actually ended up starting
as so
because
those,
you focus on entrepreneurship?
We missed that actually part, but that was totally my mistake actually. I should have brought that up. We had 3 funded companies out of the first 60 students, 15 kids.